All right, let's admit it. Who doesn't love cashews? They're creamy, they're rich, they're slightly sweet, and they're found in everything these days. Cashew butter, cashew milk, cashew yogurt, vegan cheeses, the list goes on and on. They're loaded with healthy fats, fibers, and minerals like magnesium, copper, and manganese. They're also a great binder for plant-based baking. So what's the problem? Well, let me ask you this. Would you munch on poison ivy? Would you spread poison ivy on your toast? Would you sip a poison ivy latte? Because here's the thing. Cashews aren't nuts. They're actually part of the poison ivy family. Yes, the same plant that gives people rashes, hives, and inflammation. Now, let me explain. Cashews come from growing on the bottom of a fruit called the cashew apple. When it's harvested, the toxic outer shell is removed by hand, and the fruit is eaten. Now, I've done mission work to Brazil many times, and I've been served cashews many times. But the nut is always gone because they wouldn't think of exposing me to that nut. In fact, in Brazil, there's even a condition called cashew picker's disease, caused by direct skin contact with the raw cashew peel. Now, that outer shell contains urushiol, the same chemical that makes poison ivy so irritating. In fact, raw cashews are so toxic that they must be roasted or steamed to destroy the urushiol before they're even legally sold. So the next time you see raw cashews in the grocery store, trust me, they're not actually raw. And that's a good thing. Now, recently I shared an Instagram reel about cashews, and I had a ton of comments. One person from Brazil was nice enough to speak up and said, "I'm from Brazil, and you're absolutely right. A Brazilian would never think of eating a cashew because we know how bad they are for you." Thank you, person from Brazil. I learned it from Brazil by working mission work, and I'm passing that information on to you. In the plant paradox, I showed several papers in the dermatologic literature of how cashews cause skin rashes and skin inflammation. So even dermatologists write about this. Now, here's some questions from people on Instagram. So, can you soak cashews to reduce phytic acid? Let's talk about phytic acid for a minute. If you follow people who worry about anti-nutrients in plants, things like phytic acid constantly come up. And yes, phytic acid potentially can prevent you from absorbing vital minerals and iron. But hold on. Recently, there's been a paper that shows that if you have the right gut bacteria, if you've got normal gut buddies, they happen to like phytic acid, and they convert phytic acid to, get ready, short-chain fatty acids. And if you've been following my last few books, you know that short-chain fatty acids, like butyrate, are the holy grail of good gut health and good overall health. So let's not obsess about phytic acid. You can soak the cashews all you want. It will actually reduce the lectin content, which is far more interesting in terms of damage to your gut. Next question, how do you address the studies out there claiming that cashews are anti-inflammatory? So first of all, whenever I look at a study, I always take the entire study. I don't just look at the abstract. The abstract is usually a tease. So I want to know who's doing the study, particularly who's paying for the study. For instance, the Almond Growers Association pays for most of the studies about the benefits of almonds on humans. Imagine that. Look at who paid for the study. More importantly, is it an animal or a human study? Now, rat studies show that cashews help with joint disease. First of all, how do you get joint disease in a rat? That's a good question. But more importantly, you have to remember that rats and rodents in general are grain and seed predators. And they have a microbiome that equips them to handle all of these lectins and anti-nutrients that grains and nuts use to protect themselves from being eaten. For instance, squirrels happen to love acorns, a nut. Humans cannot eat acorns because of the tannins, lectins, and other anti-nutrients. It tears up our guts. The Chumash Indians who lived near me and still do in Santa Barbara used acorn flour as one of their main nutrients. But the steps they had to do to get these anti-nutrients, these lectins out of acorns, you can write a book about. Rats and all other rodents like squirrels have a microbiome that does this for them. So a rat study telling you that cashews aren't bad for you or might even be good for you has nothing to do with human studies. Now, there is one human study looking at the effect of cashews and a calorie-restricted diet on gut wall health and inflammation. And kind of point of the study was cashews heal gut wall damage. Well, if you actually look at the old paper, no, they don't. It turns out it was the calorie restriction that actually healed the gut, like I've written about for many years. And the cashews actually had no effect one way or another. But the way the paper is written makes you think that it was the cashews that did it. No, there was no statistically significant benefit of eating cashews with a calorie-restricted diet in repairing your gut wall. And by the way, all you needed to do was do a calorie-restricted diet and your gut wall repaired, just like I've written about. What about the negative effects of cashews? Like I mentioned, look at the plant paradox for these studies. These are dermatologic studies. Now, we've also asked to share some patient stories or blood work about eating cashews. Now, a few years ago, actually, when the plant paradox came out, I was doing an interview with a juice company in Santa Monica, and it was a podcast, and a woman was complaining on the set about her stomach issues. She had severe gut issues, and she was actually drinking a cashew latte. And she, after we were done, came over and she said, this is really interesting because I've got such terrible gut issues and nothing was working. I've given up grains, I've given up dairy, and that's why I'm using cashew milk. And she says, I swear I'm worse by using the cashew milk than I was with the dairy. So I explained to her about cashews. A few months later, they had me back on the podcast because it was a popular podcast. And the first thing that happened when I walked into the room is this young lady comes running up to me and she says, "You cured me. All my pain, all my acid indigestion went away. And I gave up the cashew milk and eating cashews." And that was it. So, what can you eat instead? If you love that creamy, nutty flavor, here are a few gut-friendly swaps I recommend. First of all, pili nuts. They're incredibly low in carbs and lectins, and they're creamy, just like cashews. Roasted macadamia nuts. Now, this is really a super nut, but buy them roasted, or if you can find them, buy whole raw nuts. If they're in half and they're raw, they go rancid very quickly. The other one, if you're looking for that mouthfeel and creamy texture, get yourself some pine nuts. You're going to get that same wonderful texture, but pine nuts are actually loaded with some very interesting fats that have been shown to help with weight management. Fun fact, I have a product that I use, Siberian pine nut oil, in that product to help with weight. Now, chestnuts. Chestnuts are loaded with prebiotic fiber. And in fact, in Italy, they're so popular that chestnut flour is widely available for baking purposes, and chestnut gnocchi is widely available. How about walnuts? Walnuts are a rich source of alpha-linolenic acid, a short-chain omega-3 fat that is just miraculous, and I can't stop writing about it. Pistachios, the highest melatonin content of any food. And no, melatonin is not the hormone that puts you to sleep. Melatonin is one of only 2 antioxidants in your mitochondria. So get your melatonin. Think about baru nuts, hazelnuts. Whenever I'm over in Europe, particularly in Italy and France, you wouldn't believe how many salads, how many artichoke salads use chopped hazelnuts as part of the salad. In fact, whenever we return from that trip, we go on a hazelnut kick for a while because we're so amazed that it's available all the time. Yeah, cashew nuts are delicious for your mouth, but not so much for you. More amazing episodes just like this one. Watch now. You'd be doing your health a huge disservice. Sorry, peanut and peanut butter lovers, but this nut can actually take years off your life.